We're back, and I'm thrilled to be able to say we're joined by one of the country's preeminent experts on the Middle East, a longtime duty resource for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, a man we are privileged to consider both a friend and a valued resource of our Center for Security Policy, for whom he published a terrific book, Modern Islamic Warfare. An ancient doctrine marches on. His name is Dr. Harold Rhode. Catching up with him in Jerusalem. Well, welcome back. It's
I'm
good
in
to have you with us.
Florida.
I beg your pardon. We're catching up with him not in Jerusalem, but in Florida. Well, we're glad to have you wherever you are.
Nice to be here, Frank, as always.
I have a couple of things that I want to hit with you quickly, and not a whole lot of time, Harold. Let me start by asking about the conflict that erupted on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem today. It is just the latest incident of rising violence, it seems. First of all, does this constitute, do you think, the makings of a new intifada at the hands of the Palestinians? And have they been encouraged to engage in renewed violence along those lines by the Biden administration's policies?
It's hard to know whether this is going to be a long-term thing, but here's why it's happening. The Palestinians see both the Israelis as indecisive and the Americans as weak. And in the Middle East, when you see weakness, you pounce. So I don't know where it's going to go, but we can see this continuing as long as the administration here keeps pushing the Palestinian agenda, which the Gulf, Israel's and America's Gulf allies don't want.
Don't want, and in fact worked around with the Abraham Accords, of course, and this administration has reverted to the idea that the centerpiece of American policy must be the Palestinian agenda. And I'm afraid that, as you say, does constitute an impetus to them to behave badly. This brings me to a second question. That same perceived irresolution on the part of the Israeli government and the proclivities of this administration here in the United States seem to be emboldening the Iranians as well. We were just talking with Sam Faddis about what may be an operation by them to kill one or more senior American officials, including through the penetration of our Secret Service at the White House, no less. Talk a little bit about the deal that is still borning, if you will, and what are the purposes of the Iranians in pursuing that deal? Is it about our humiliation? Is it about obtaining tremendous concessions from them, and also in the process undermining the U.S. Israel alliance?
Absolutely. It's a little hard for us to understand, but if we want to understand what motivates Iran, we got to look at things the way the Iranians look at things. The Iranians
What a concept.
Yeah, well, I didn't detect that very much in the past in government, but it's even much less today. Now, what's the bottom line here? They're Muslims. From their point of view, America and Israel are working together. Now, we don't know whether it's America calling the shots or is it Israel calling the shots. I'm talking as an Iranian would talk here. Now, in Vienna, the fact that it appears that America is doing everything to abandon and to weaken Israel, the Iranians will take advantage of every opportunity to try to do this because they know that the non-Muslims are one nation. We all work together against the Muslims. Even a lot of secular Muslims think this way. Now, so is it possibly that Israel is calling the shots in Vienna? I know this is absurd, but I'm trying to explain it as
it does sound not only absurd but just preposterous on the grounds that what clearly the Israelis want is us not to be making a deal with the Iranians.
Well, we know that, but here's the thing: maybe America is directing Israel to make all these raids in Syria against Iranian prospects. Maybe America is directing Israel to target so many Iranian scientists and bases in Iran. If since all non-Muslims are working together, this is a united front. Now, I know this is absurd.
I only wish it were so. It seems as though we're more of a divided front. But Harold, the larger point is this: what the Iranians may think is again a matter of uh, speculation, but what they're doing clearly is they're holding out for more and more and more concessions, billions of dollars, which will, as you know, flow into their weapons programs, including nuclear weapons programs and their terrorism. And they are, it seems, determined to, at the same time that they're demanding these concessions, taking steps, perhaps including this plot to kill Americans here, senior Americans, former if not present, that bespeaks a confidence that they can do anything and get away with it, given the, again, the determination of this administration to get a deal.
I think you're right. There's the great Bernard Lewis, the late professor of Middle East history, used to say, "They spit in our eyes, and we say it's raining." We choose to ignore this, and by choosing to ignore what they're doing, and then they got all the patience in the world. They know how to wait. We need things now. We need it done. But in the Iranians and most of the Middle East, patience. They know how to wait. So the infiltration into all sorts of American institutions would not surprise me in the least, and that they would wait for their opportunity and strike. And I think I can't know this, but logically, from an Iranian point of view, when the opportunity comes, they will inflict damage on our leaders.
Yeah, here inside the United States, not least. And this would be what they would consider to be an eye for an eye, I suppose, in their tradition, having taken out one of their top leaders, arguably one of the most malevolent forces in the world, Qasem Soleimani. Harold, to the extent that Israel is now in the throes of another political crisis, and I'm not talking about the possible intifada, I'm talking about just the internal dynamics of the coalition government falling and what comes next. Make book for me on how that plays into these perhaps life and death issues for Israel of an incipient Iranian nuclear capability, as well as uh, perhaps many of their proxies, not just the Palestinians, but Hezbollah and Hamas and Syria, um, taking the opportunity to mortally threaten Israel in this moment.
It's the way they think. The Israelis, I would only say one thing: they don't have the opportunity to delude themselves. They know what's going on. The country is, by and large, a right wing country. They believe in standing up for themselves. I assume that will happen and again. But the political system is even crazier than some of the things that we are witnessing in Washington. It's more convoluted, and so who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah. Well, what I'm most concerned about is while we wait to see what happens in terms of a new government or new elections, and you're clearly right, Harold, that it's a center right country. It's just that it can't quite express that decisively in the elections so far. But the bigger point is, would you anticipate, Harold, that in the absence of clarity about who's in charge, they can possibly act as decisively as I think you're right they need to in the face of these emerging threats from Iran.
I would hope that they can. Again, I'm not a military guy. I'm not an military expert, but military experts that I know say that Israel was quite capable of taking care of the Iranian nuclear program. Let's hope they have the guts to do what is necessary.
Yeah. Well, let's hope they do, and that we don't wind up interfering with those efforts as well. Harold, you mentioned a moment ago the Gulf allies. they've been sometime allies, oftentimes, but relatively speaking, in the Middle East, they've been more reliable friends than an awful lot of others. Specifically, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain. Um, all of these nations have been under attack by the Houthi terrorists, who, again, as part of the concessions leading, they think, to a deal with Iran, the Biden administration has removed from the terrorism list. Um, do you anticipate that notwithstanding their clear anger with this government, that the Gulf states are now sufficiently aligned with Israel in dealing with this Iranian threat that that will be sustained? Uh, again, I pray so, but what's your assessment of where they stand today?
My assessment is that behind the scenes, to quote the former Israeli ambassador to Washington, if they can't have the 800-pound gorilla on their side, that is the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the Emiratis, and all, then the 250-pound gorilla works quite fine. They wanted to have, they had this summit in the Negev, which was supposed to be.
Harold, I'm out of time. I think you just mean to say that the Israelis are the 250-pound gorilla in this context, and let's hope they're up to the job. Harold Rhode, thank you for your insights on all of these things. We're going to have you back when we have a bit more time. Thank you for your time today, and a very meaningful Passover to you, my friend. Thank you for taking the time on this day to talk with us. Thank you. God bless you. Next up, we'll speak with Rick Fisher about China, space, and Russia right after this.